The sound of Maelstrom's wings shook the very earth as Varos descended upon the king's encampment outside Dragonstone. The colossal dragon landed with a thunderous impact, sending waves of dust and debris spiraling into the air. Soldiers scrambled to steady themselves, their eyes wide with a mixture of awe and fear at the sight of the ancient beast. Scourge and Vermilion followed close behind, their roars echoing across the camp like primal war cries. Robert Baratheon, standing near his war table with Stannis, Ned Stark, and Daenerys Targaryen, turned sharply at the commotion. His face, hardened by years of battle, now carried a look of confusion and alarm. "By the gods," he muttered. "What's he doing now?" Varos dismounted swiftly from Maelstrom, his fiery gaze locked onto Robert as he strode toward the assembled leaders. His crimson and black robes billowed in the gusts from the dragon's wings, his presence commanding silence from everyone in the camp. "King Robert," Varos began, his voice carrying the weight of urgency. "The time to act is now. The Night King's army is larger than we ever imagined. 500,000 wights, maybe more, giants, monstrous creatures of death, and an unrelenting tide of darkness march toward the wall as we speak. If we delay, the wall will fall, and the dead will overrun the realm." Robert's expression hardened, his grip tightening on the pommel of his warhammer. 500,000? He repeated, his voice low but laced with dread. "You're certain?" Varos nodded gravely. "I've seen them with my own eyes. The dragons burned a portion of their host, but it was barely a dent. The time for strategy and caution is over. Muster all forces now. The living must march to the wall." Before anyone could respond, a horn sounded in the distance. A long, resonant blast that sent shivers down the spines of everyone in the camp. The sound was ancient, otherworldly, carrying with it an echo of power and fire. Varos's expression shifted slightly, his fiery eyes narrowing. "It's the horn of the Valyrian Freehold," Daenerys said softly, her voice tinged with awe and uncertainty. The camp turned toward the horizon, where an army began to materialize from the haze. 50,000 soldiers marched in perfect formation, their armor gleaming with a fiery crimson hue that seemed to shimmer like molten metal. Each warrior bore the sigil of the Valyrian Freehold, an ancient emblem long thought lost to history. Behind them, fire priests marched in solemn ranks, their staffs glowing with flames that burned unnaturally bright, illuminating the sky even as the sun dipped toward the horizon. The army came to a halt just outside the camp, their banners fluttering in the wind. The fire priests raised their staffs in unison, and the flames erupted higher, casting an eerie glow over the encampment. Robert turned back to Varos, his voice sharp and demanding. "What is this, Valyrian? Another of your surprises? What else have you been hiding from us?" Varos met Robert's gaze steadily, his voice calm but resolute. "This is my army, 50,000 of the elite warriors of Valyria, trained and equipped in the ways of the ancient Freehold. They have waited in secret for this moment, for the time when the world would need them most." Daenerys stepped closer, her eyes fixed on the soldiers with a mixture of awe and confusion. The Freehold's armies were said to have perished with the Doom. "How is this possible?" Varos's fiery gaze shifted to her. "Not all were lost, Daenerys Stormborn. A fragment of Valyria survived, hidden in the shadows, preserving the knowledge, the traditions, and the power of the old ways. They are here now because the threat we face demands nothing less." Robert let out a harsh laugh, though it carried no humor. 50,000 soldiers appear out of nowhere, and I'm supposed to trust them? They're dressed like the fires of hell, and you expect me to believe they're here to help. They are here to fight, Varos corrected, his tone firm. The dead march for the wall, and every sword, every flame, every ounce of strength is needed to stop them. You may not trust them, Robert Baratheon, but you will need them. Ned stepped forward, his voice calm but laced with concern. If they are here to fight for the living, then we cannot waste time questioning their motives. The dead will not wait for us to resolve our doubts. Robert grunted, his eyes narrowing as he studied the soldiers and priests. "Fine," he said finally, his voice heavy with reluctance. "But mark my words, Varos. If this army of yours turns on us, I'll have your head, dragons or no dragons." Varos inclined his head slightly, his fiery gaze unflinching. "You won't need to, Robert. They serve only one purpose, to preserve the living." The horn of the Valyrian freehold sounded again, its ancient cry echoing across the camp. The soldiers stood motionless, their presence a reminder that the time for preparation had ended. The living would march, and the final battle against the dead drew closer with every passing moment. In the grand war tent pitched at the heart of the encampment, the air was thick with tension and urgency. King Robert Baratheon sat at the head of the massive table, a tankard of ale untouched before him. Around him were gathered the most prominent leaders of the realm. Eddard Stark, ever solemn and calculating. Stannis Baratheon, rigid and unyielding. Renly Baratheon, his charm subdued in the face of the grim reality. Oberyn Martell, his sharp eyes flickering with both interest and suspicion. Robb Stark, the young wolf, his youthful vigor tempered by the weight of command. Daenerys Targaryen, her regal presence undeniable. And Varos, the enigmatic figure whose dragons and forces loomed large. Over the meeting, the table was strewn with maps of the north and the wall, markers indicating the known positions of wildlings, the advancing White Army, and the Night's Watch at Castle Black. The faint flicker of torchlight illuminated the determined faces of those present, casting long shadows on the tense walls. Robert leaned forward, his hands gripping the edge of the table. "500,000 whites, maybe more, are marching for the wall," he said, his voice heavy with urgency. "If the wall falls, they'll spill into the north like a tide of death, and there won't be a damn thing to stop them." Ned nodded, his tone calm but resolute. "The Night's Watch is strong, but they are few. Even with the wildlings who've crossed the wall, they won't hold against a force of this size. We must reinforce them immediately." Stannis, his face a mask of stoic determination, spoke next. "The wildlings must be armed and trained. They know the terrain better than anyone and will be crucial in the defense of the wall. But we cannot rely solely on them." Oberyn tapped the map with a finger, his tone laced with sharp practicality. "The key will be strategy. We cannot simply throw our forces at the dead and hope for the best. If the Night King leads this army personally, we must find a way to draw him out. Cut off the head, and the body will fall." Daenerys's voice was firm but measured as she addressed the group. "The dragons will fight, but Varos has made it clear that their use must be strategic. They cannot be risked unnecessarily, and we cannot allow them to fall into the Night King's hands." Varos stepped forward, his fiery gaze sweeping across the room. "Maelstrom, Scourge, and Vermilion will rain fire upon the dead, but they will not engage the Night King directly. The dead have no fear, no weakness, save for dragonglass and fire. Every weapon forged from the mountain of Dragonstone must be in the hands of your men by the time we march." Renly, who had remained quiet until now, leaned forward with a hint of frustration. "How do we even begin to fight an enemy like this? 500,000 whites, and gods know what else? Giants? Dead beasts? It's madness. It's war," Robert snapped, his tone sharp. "We've faced worse odds before and won." Robb Stark spoke up, his voice carrying the weight of youthful determination. "We'll need to organize our forces into specialized units. Archers with dragonglass-tipped arrows, pikemen with dragonglass spears, and fire teams to hold the line. The wall itself must be fortified, every inch of it." Oberyn added, his tone grim but focused. "And we must plan for the worst. If the wall falls, we need contingencies to hold the neck and Moat Cailin. If the dead break through the north, they cannot be allowed to reach the Riverlands." Daenerys glanced at Varos, then spoke decisively. "My Unsullied will join the defense of the wall, alongside the Second Sons. They will hold the line, no matter the cost." Stannis nodded in approval. "Good. Every man who can fight will be needed. But we must also have a plan to evacuate the Night's Watch if the wall is breached. Their knowledge of the enemy is invaluable." Robert looked around the table, his gaze settling on Varos. And what of your Valyrian army, Varos? What role will they play in this? Varos inclined his head, his voice calm but authoritative. The Valyrian freehold soldiers will serve as a vanguard against the dead. They are trained to face overwhelming odds and will hold the line where others falter. The fire priests will ensure the dead cannot rise again where our forces fall. Robert leaned back, exhaling deeply. Fine, then we march. Every force, every sword, every bloody ounce of strength we've got. The North won't fall while I still draw breath. Ned placed a hand on the table, his voice heavy with conviction. We fight not for glory or thrones, but for survival. If we fail here, there will be no 7 kingdoms left to save. The gathered leaders nodded, their differences set aside in the face of the shared threat. The stakes had never been higher, and the time for preparation was over. The living would march for the wall, united against the tide of death that loomed ever closer. The battle for survival had begun. In the quiet stillness of Dragonstone's chambers, the flickering glow of firelight cast long shadows on the walls as Varos stood before Daenerys Targaryen. She sat on a simple throne of stone, her expression contemplative as she listened to the enigmatic sorcerer whose words carried weight beyond their immediate purpose. The distant roar of Maelstrom echoed faintly from the cliffs outside, a reminder of the immense power that hovered just beyond reach. Daenerys, Varos began, his voice low but laced with a quiet intensity. Maelstrom alone is enough to destroy the Night King. His fire burns hotter than anything this world has seen in centuries. Even the coldest death cannot withstand his wrath. Daenerys studied him carefully, her violet eyes narrowing slightly. If that is true, then why delay? Why not strike now and end this threat before it reaches the wall? Varos stepped closer, his fiery gaze unwavering. Because power, when revealed too soon, becomes a threat to those who do not yet understand it. The usurper, Robert Baratheon, and his allies cannot comprehend the full might of Maelstrom or the dragons. If they do, their fear will outweigh their reason. Their loyalty to the fight against the dead will falter, and their ambitions will resurface. Daenerys's expression hardened, her voice firm. You mean Robert will see me as a greater threat than the Night King? Exactly, Varos said with a nod. Men like Robert are driven by pride and the need to preserve their legacy. If he sees the dragons as weapons beyond his control, he will turn on us the moment the Night King is vanquished. We must let him believe the fight is winnable through unity, not overwhelming power. Daenerys leaned back slightly, her gaze thoughtful. And after the Night King is defeated? What then? You've spoken of visions and prophecies, but what is your true purpose, Varos? Varos's fiery eyes flickered as he spoke, his tone deepening. The Lord of Light has shown me the path. Westeros is just one piece on the chessboard. The true destiny of Valyria is not confined to these shores. It is prophesied that a new Valyrian empire will rise, one that encompasses the known world, uniting not just Westeros but Essos, the Summer Isles, and beyond. Daenerys's lips parted slightly, surprise flickering across her face. A Valyrian empire? You mean to rule everything? Varos inclined his head, his expression calm but resolute. Not just rule, Daenerys. To unite. To bring order where there is chaos. To bring fire where there is darkness. The Freehold was a shadow of what it could have been, divided by ambition and weakened by complacency. The new empire will not fall to such flaws. It will be built on strength, purpose, and the will of fire. Daenerys's expression grew guarded, her tone skeptical. And where do I stand in this vision, Varos? Am I a pawn in your prophecy? Or do you see me as an equal? Varos stepped closer, lowering his voice. You are no pawn, Daenerys. You are the mother of dragons, the rightful heir to House Targaryen, and the flame that will ignite the world. Together, we will forge this empire not for conquest but for survival. The threats to this world extend far beyond the Night King. He is but a harbinger of the chaos to come. Daenerys rose from her seat, her posture regal and commanding. If what you say is true, then we will face those threats together. But let me make one thing clear, Varos. I will not be a puppet to anyone's prophecy. If I am to forge this new empire, it will be on my terms, as a queen, not as a servant to the flames. Varos bowed his head slightly, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. As it should be, Daenerys Stormborn, the flames have chosen you, not to serve, but to lead. And when the time comes, the world will bow not out of fear, but out of necessity. Daenerys turned toward the window, her gaze fixed on the distant horizon. For now, we focus on the Night King. But if your vision is true, Varos, then this is only the beginning. Varos stepped back into the shadows, his voice a quiet murmur as he spoke. The beginning of fire and blood. The world will burn before it is reborn, and we will stand at the center of the flames. The chamber fell silent, the weight of their conversation lingering in the air. Outside, Maelstrom let out another deep, resonant roar, as if to punctuate the path that lay ahead. A path that would shape the fate of not just Westeros, but the world itself.